Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be venturing into the dark world of creepers. You're in for quite a ride, so get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I work at a hotel in my town and was driving my husband's truck to work as he was taking mine to the shop to get serviced. He has a very large truck, and I only drive it when I absolutely have to. When I pull into the side parking lot, I notice the entire lot is covered in snow and no one can see the lines for the spots. I look like a moron and try to park in what I hope is a spot, backing up and moving forward several times. When I finally park, I get out of the truck and grab my backpack, when I hear someone yelling from the sidewalk from behind the parking lot. "You need to learn how to park." I'm embarrassed, but just close the truck door, lock it, and begin walking to the front of the building. Now, the hotel has a side entrance for employees, but it takes a code, and I have a bad memory. So I just walk to the front and go through the main entrance, and I hear the guy yell again. "Did you hear me?" I walk faster and take a peek behind me. The guy's following me. I keep walking but call back. "Please leave me alone, I need to get to work." Before I can reach the corner of the building and make my way to the entrance, the guy grabs my arm and spins me around. I'll never forget what this guy looked like for as long as I live. He wore dark clothes with a torn up winter coat. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled like a combination of cigarettes and whiskey. I guess he must have been drunk, but didn't slur at all when speaking. "You're coming with me." The guy began dragging me back to the truck, and I tried to pull my arm away from him. "Let go of me." "Give me the key. We're taking a drive." I began yelling for help, and his grip on my arm got tighter. I'm a 26-year-old woman, not skinny but a lot smaller than this guy. He was dragging me easily, and the snow on the ground just made my feet slide along. "Someone help, please!" No one was near us, and I keep fighting to get away from this guy. I prayed that there would be guests that could possibly hear me, but it was our slow season, so most likely there'd be no one in the rooms on that side of the building. The guy turns back to glare at me. "Shut up and give me the keys." Now, I was carrying my backpack on one shoulder, as it was big and bulky from my uniform and shoes. I quickly slipped the strap down my arm, grabbed it, and swung it right into his face. The guy let me go, and I just ran for my life to the front doors. I heard the guys screaming, but ignored him. I was way too scared to look back at him. I ran inside, and all the way to the employee locker room. When I finally calmed down enough, I went to the front desk to talk to security. Sadly, there were no cameras on that side of the building, so nothing was recorded. They called the cops and made a report. The cops informed the general manager of the hotel that they needed to seriously consider security cameras on that side of the building, as drunks and drug users were known to be in this area, as there was a bar just a few streets down. They got a description for the guy and said they would keep an eye out for him. The manager apologized like crazy about the incident, but I told him it wasn't his fault. He's a really good guy. I did ask the security guards to follow me out, so that I could check on the truck. Thankfully it was fine. The security guard promised to make more rounds outside, especially that early in the morning. So I told my husband. He drove me to work the next day, and I was happy to see that security were keeping their word and they would make rounds outside that time of morning. They still currently are. I'm driving myself to work again, but I don't get out of my truck until I see the security guard. He watches to make sure I get in okay. I think he's also hoping to catch the guy if he comes back. The guy that covers him on his days off does the same thing. I'm going to be obtaining pepper spray, perhaps something else after work today. I haven't heard from the police yet, and I may not. Hopefully the guy was scared off from coming back to this area, or maybe he tried to go back and the security guard scared him off. Either way, I hope to never see him again unless he's in handcuffs and being taken to jail. And thankfully, he didn't get my backpack. In any case, I hope to never meet him again. I had a first date with a girl. We had a happy hour dinner that went well, so we wanted to keep things going. There were a decent number of red flags flying, chief among them being her ex-boyfriend was a 1%er in a local bike gang and was in prison. But she was hot and I'm an idiot, so we wandered down the street to her favorite bar. At this point, she's a full-on social butterfly, wandering the bar chatting to all the regulars, so instead of following her around like a puppy dog, I just saddle up at the bar and start talking to the group of guys next to me. Nice dudes, very chatty and amiable. Eventually, a number of bikers pull up. Now I'm a bit concerned and ask my new friends if everything's cool since I've told them my situation. They reassure me that everything's fine and I'm welcome there. Maybe an hour later, I wander off to the bathroom, come back, and these dudes tell me in a concerned tone that I need to leave. Now. To this day, I have no idea what happened, but there was no mistaking the urgency of their tone, so I promptly paid my tab and headed out to my car. I hadn't seen my date in a while, so I was a bit surprised when she came running out of the bar, jumped to the passenger seat and yelled, "Drive!" No high-speed chase or anything after that. But let's just say I was freaked the hell out. This happened about 12 years ago. I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old. The house my family lived in at the time was a block away from a canyon that runs through my town. The canyon is pretty much all lava rock, as we are near a lot of mountains. This canyon has a paved walking trail going from end to end, as well as a dog park, a skate park, tennis courts and softball fields, and some playgrounds here and there in the more populated areas in the center and south of the canyon. Not an uncommon place for people to spend time. Our house was at the north end of the canyon, where those populated locations are sparse, and it's mostly just the walking paths and a water treatment plant. This canyon is also pretty heavily wooded in the area we were near. That all being said, my friends and my siblings and I, all girls, used to go down there all the time in the summer, specifically to this one spot we called the roller coaster. Basically, it was a section of a small dirt walking path opposite to the side of the canyon that the paved walking path was on, that dipped up and down kind of like a halfpipe. We liked to run up and down it and see how much speed we could gain. So, we're there one summer's day, running up and down and back and forth, timing each other to see how fast we could run and back up to the other side. When my turn comes up, my friend counts down, and I take off down the hill. When I get to the bottom, right before I start to run up to the other side of the half-pipe-shaped dip in the path, I hear a loud thump on the dirt behind me, and I feel the ground shake under my feet a little. I stop dead in my tracks and turn around to see what it was. It was a rock or boulder about the size of a basketball. Freaked out that this thing almost landed on me, I scan up the canyon wall to see where it came from, only to have my eyes land on two men sitting in the rocks on the canyon wall about 50 feet up. One is looking down at me, smiling. His smile is something I can picture to this day. It was so sinister. He had clearly just thrown this giant rock down at me, and he'd clearly been watching us run back and forth waiting for his opportunity. I decided to finish out the roller coaster as to not scare my friends and little sister. When I get back, they start teasing me about how long it took me to return since I stopped mid-run. They asked where the rock came from, and I said it must have fallen from the canyon wall, and that we should go because more might fall and it probably isn't safe. My friends and sister are bummed but agree, and I somehow convinced them we should run home. I wanted to get out of there, and I'm secretly terrified these men will follow us. When we get home, I don't say anything to my parents, as I'm afraid I'll get in trouble. I never go back to that spot, and made up excuses when my friends and siblings suggested it. I'll never forget that man's smile. I never understand why he would do what he did, but I still get freaked out about what would have happened if I'd have taken off down the hill a second later, or if they had followed us after I spotted them. So to the man who was throwing basketball-sized chunks of lava rock, let's not meet again. I am a 25-year-old woman who currently lives in England. I live in a countryside setting and around 2 hours away from the heart of Cambridgeshire. I live on the end house of a row of houses with my 2 older siblings and parents. I have mousy brown hair, blue eyes, and 5'5", and currently weigh 140 pounds, so I'm not the skinniest of girls. I've been told by many people that I look at youngest 17 to 18. This detail will be important later in the story. So here we go. I'm going to start by saying this is where it all started, back in June of 2019. The past few weeks had been very good weather, and my mum told me previously that she had planned for our relatives to come around for a barbecue. This included my auntie, uncle, and cousin with their kids, and other halves. So yeah, it was a big get-together. So I had started to plan to make the garden look a bit better, as we will have a barbecue outside, so that meant painting, weeding, planting, and flowers. I have to do all this back-to-back work in the evening, as I work very early to midday, and I'm usually back around 3 o'clock. But it was summer, and the sun was out till late, so it wasn't much of an issue. Now, as I previously mentioned, we were at the end house, and our next door neighbor who owns her house, we do not, she rents her room out to tenants, which their window looks out into our garden. So in June every other day, me and my family, once we had finished work, would notice a man. He'd be looking out of the window that is located nearest to the garden fence. He would be staring down at us. We are the kind of family that don't give it too much thought, so ignored him, thinking maybe he was a new tenant that had moved in, just getting used to his new surroundings. But for a few days I would notice that when I came home and started gardening, he would stare at me from his window, therefore making me slightly uncomfortable, but I still tried to not let it get to me, and maybe I was being over-paranoid. A few days passed of him just staring at me, until one day I was coming in through the front door, and he was also outside and went, "Hi, my name's Dave." The nosy neighbor at the window? I awkwardly nodded my head and replied, "Hi Dave, I'm Charlotte." I completely felt sick to my stomach when he smirked and looked at me from top to bottom. I let out a cough in nervousness and then splutter out, "I have to go to dinner, bye." Before he can reply, I rush into the house, feeling very shaky. I again just shake this feeling off and carry on with my day. That is until the evening when I let my dog out into the back garden and realizing he is leaning out of the window. I ignore him by turning my back in that direction, silently praying that he will not talk to me. That's when he pipes up going, "Hey Charlotte." I let out a sigh, cursing my inability to be rude. You see, I'm the type of person who does not like confrontation. I have a lot of patience and just don't like to be rude. "Hi," I reply awkwardly. He smiles again and I feel my stomach eat itself. "So, would you go on a date with me?" I stand there completely frozen. Dave is 60, at least, bald head, tattoos on his arms. I also put in here that when he is always out the window, he never wears a shirt. He has sunken eyes and is extremely skinny. I looked at him uncomfortably and shake my head. "Look, I'm sorry, I'm not interested." He gives me a smirk before going, "Not even for a meal?" he pushes. I shake my head. Look, sorry, I'm not interested, I say politely. Not even for a drink? He says. I grit my teeth. I'm standing there thinking, what the hell is wrong with this dude? Can't he take a hint? I again reiterate I'm not interested, and turn away hoping to cut his conversation short. Am I making you uncomfortable? Can I say hi? I spin my head and give him a, "Are you kidding me?" look, and narrow my eyes. You can say hi, but if you keep asking me out, then yes, it's going to make me feel uncomfortable. I turn away from him, and this is when he continually calls my name. I just ignore him, hoping he'll get the hint and go. But this is where I hear someone to tell him to get down from the window. I will also make everyone aware that my neighbor who owns the house was currently in surgery, and she's elderly, so I don't blame her for all the events following, as I don't think she could have helped in any way either. A few days passed, and it was now July. Every single day that I'm outside doing the garden, which was around 2 hours each, he is always staring out the window at me, or he is lurking just behind the curtain so he thinks I can't see him. I start to dread going outside every day and begin to feel trapped. This is when I tell my family, and my mum and dad decide to have a chat with him. So my mum is like all mama bear going next door, and she's the kind of person that is scary because she's calm. So yeah, you don't want to mess with her. They come back and tell me that he has said he is so sorry and didn't mean to make me uncomfortable, and he won't do it again. Basically saying all the stuff they know they want to hear. But for the next few days it doesn't stop. He is again still at the window staring at me, and it's gotten so bad that when I tap on my living room window, my sister knows that he's there, and for her to come out. This is the time when he also puts up some blinds, and I can't tell if he's looking through the blinds at me. I also start to experience trouble with sleeping and panic attacks as the situation is stressing me out so bad. The next incident that happens was again, all the family got home from work at the same time, and we started to put the cars in the garden. We have our own driveway in our back garden as the garden is huge. I was absolutely dying to go to the toilet, so Mum, seeing this, gave me the front door key. I ran around the front door about to put the key in the front door when I heard that next door's door had opened. I look up and see Dave smirking at me. My heart just about stopped and I felt an overwhelming feeling to run away. Seconds later, my brother was by my side. Instead of going into the front door, we ran back to the back garden to go in the back way. Unknown to me at the time, my mum had seen Dave jump down from the window when he saw that I was going to the front door. My mum then shouted for my brother to follow. Within the next few weeks, the evenings stayed the same with me gardening and him staring. My sibling would often come out with me, but he would disappear and reappear if they went indoors. Another day of me gardening, and my brother was outside in the garden as well, as was the creep, staring out of the window. My legs started shaking, and I honestly thought that they would collapse underneath me. My nerves felt like they were eating me alive, and I felt like I was on the brink of another panic attack. Bro, I'm gonna go start the front garden. He nodded, replying he would come with me to keep me company. Once we started doing the front garden, Dave came out with a handful of rubbish 4 times while looking at me up and down. I thought I was going to break down crying. I'm standing there just screaming, "Why won't he leave me alone? I told him I'm not interested, just leave me alone." I look away and concentrate at the leaves I'm putting in bags. Dave then proceeds to walk out, slam the door in the opposite direction, and down the street. The way our houses are set up is that it's basically like a small estate. So you can do a lap around the houses and you will walk past our house. I'm cleaning the leaves, and mentally in my head I'm thinking he's going to pass the block and walk past us. and lo and behold, 10 minutes later, he walks straight past our gate and goes, "How you two doing?" I ignore his attempts at talking as I feel my blood rush into my ears and my heart would not stop pumping. I look at my brother and he gives me a concerned look. The next day, I'm sitting in the garden and I get a picture of him looking out the window staring at me. This was for future evidence for the police. After a few days of him lurking at his windows, I'd had enough and called the non-emergency police line. They said they would be out that evening, Saturday around 8, and 2 officers came and I explained the whole situation. I won't bore you with the details, but I broke down crying, and all they said was it was suspicious him looking out the window, but there wasn't a lot they could do. They said they would look into it, but I never heard back from them. There I was, sitting like a prisoner in my own home. I couldn't even go into my own garden without feeling uncomfortable, because I knew he would be lurking there. A few more days carried on with the same routine, but this time I only went out for around 20 minutes because I was just too scared to go into my own garden. My panic attacks had started to worsen, and I was having one nearly every day. I was getting sleep paralysis, and I would see him standing at the end of my bed. I was having mood swings where one day I would be feeling alright, and then an hour later be in tears because I couldn't cope with the constant paranoia. Even when I did laugh and smile, it was fake, because the stress was overwhelming and I couldn't be myself. Even the shakes I had were uncontrollable. Then the following Friday it was pouring down with rain, and I was finishing the last bits, as the barbecue was 2 weeks away, and again, I was outside, but this time I had to plant a sunflower below his window. I felt his eyes piercing through the back of my head. I started to uncontrollably shake, and my heart was pounding in my ears. I couldn't take it anymore. Could he just leave me alone? I knocked on the window to get my sister to come out, and she started to help me. I heard him cough above us, and I snapped. My previous being polite attitude went out the window. I met his eyes. "Would you stop looking at me?" I yelled. He had a split second of shock on his face before he came back to his senses and frowned. "I can look out my window if I want." I gritted my teeth. The nerve of him. "Yes, but you always are staring at me. Just leave me alone." "I have the right to look out the window. I don't care. I can and I will." I saw my sister's face turn sour. "You're looking at her whenever she goes. You don't stop gawking." I hear the anger in her voice, but I'm more concentrated on trying to calm myself down. "Piss off," he yells, disappearing from sight. I grit my teeth, trying to push the tears down. What is his problem? A minute later, he returns to the window and says loudly, "I've had a look on Google. It says here I have the right to look out my windows. I know my rights." We both reply, But he's staring at me, which is making me even more uncomfortable, and I've already told him to stop. He then proceeds to tell my sister to piss off, as well as a few other things. This is when I yell at him. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" This argument proceeds with my family coming out and my mother telling him to get down or she will call the police as he is harassing us, and he tells her to piss off, as well as a few other horrible things that I don't want to repeat. You know, very colourful language. She says she'll call the police, and we all run inside. This argument was a bit longer, but I cannot remember all of the details, as it was just a few months ago, and everyone was yelling in the heat of the moment. We do just that, and the local police said they'd be around next day, Saturday. The next day around 3 o'clock, the police come, and they seemed to take it a bit more seriously. I said I had previously reported it, and big surprise the other police officers had not put it on record. The police officer Jenny told me to explain everything. I did, and when she asked me the question, "What would you like to happen?" I couldn't hold it in and broke down. I just said, I want him to stop. I don't know how to make it stop. I couldn't handle the stress anymore. After a long discussion, she said she was going to look into it, and I nodded, not really expecting much. But the next day, she called me and asked if I would be willing to write a statement, which I did. The next day was Monday, and this was when I wrote my statement. And when I was told he was a registered offender, he would be arrested the following morning for stalking and harassment. I was so relieved, but I did not know that this was going on for a few more months. The following day they arrested him at 8 a.m. I felt a little lighthearted, and I saw them break down the door and drag him away in cuffs in the police car. That evening I also learned his full name, which I looked up. I went on to do research and found out he spent 10 years in prison for grooming a 13-year-old. This brings me to the last 5 months. I was told I was being summoned to court in October. The arrest happened in August, so a few months of worrying/paranoia, although he was out on bail, but was not allowed in my village or anywhere near me. When October rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves. So I'm sitting in the waiting area of witnesses. Everything's a blur, and I just want all of this to be over. The prosecutor then comes into the room with a crestfallen look on his face and sadly tells me that my case has been adjourned and the case will have to be booked. I again break down and can't believe my luck. He's walking the streets and he could be terrorizing another young girl. I'm then told the next court date will be February, and this brings me to the past 2 weeks. I get to court again. This time, I don't really feel like being a witness, but I know it's better for my case if I do. They usually start around 9, but are late, so they say it will start at 10. 10 rolls around, then 10:30, then 11, then 11:15. I'm starting to get worried again. What if it's adjourned again? I won't be able to have the guts to come next time. I see the prosecutor come in and I hold my breath. He smiles. He pleaded guilty. I let out a squeal and a half sob. It's all over. This is when he tells me more that I was not aware of. 2 months before he moved into the house next door, he assaulted 3 girls underage, and every year before that he's done something similar. I'm gobsmacked. Why the hell is he still on the streets? He then tells me, Charlotte, earlier I asked you how old you were. It's because you look very young for your age, and the way he was approaching you is similar to the way he approached the other girls. I stare at him but nod my head silently. I didn't realize how close to danger I had become. It's so frightening. I've just found out he got sentenced to 8 months. Not as much as I would have liked to, considering the nightmare he put me through, and those poor other girls. Though he's got 2 years probation, community service and unpaid work. I also have a restraining order which I'm very pleased about. So yeah, I'm wanted to share this for ages. Everyone out there, be safe and always trust your gut. If you feel unsafe, always tell someone, even if you feel silly about it. And to Dave, who put me through 7 months of hell, you most likely ruined those poor girls' lives. I hope you rot in hell. I was 15 at the time. I took about 10 of my little cousins with me to the park. 3 of my older cousins, but still younger than me or the same age, came with me to help. As I approached the park, there was a man and 2 kids there. He came up to me and started talking to me. I tried to give him the hint that I didn't want to talk to him, but he kept on going. I asked him, "Oh, did you bring your kids?" He nodded and kept talking, then asked me weird questions like, "Are you married? Are these your kids? How old are you?" I lied about my name and age and tried to walk away. Then he said, "I want you to sit and talk to me." I said I had something important to tell my family first, and then I joined him. I smiled and went up to one of my older cousins and said, "Pretend everything is fine, but we need to leave now." She nodded, and I watched the 2 kids leave without the man. So we started walking home again, and I made sure he didn't follow or watch where we went. I later found out that he had picked up one of my little cousins and put him back down again, and one of my cousins saw, but she froze and didn't say anything to me. Luckily, one of us saw him walk into our house, and so we called the police. They went into the house and found him. They couldn't charge him for anything, but told us that they've received complaints about him before. Something I left out was that I've seen him at the park before. I would go there with my boyfriend to hang out, and one time he was there just staring at me. He didn't approach or say anything to us. I'm assuming it was because my boyfriend was with me. This happened my junior year of high school. One of my best friends invited me to a Halloween party at her house with our school friends and some of her friends from her previous school. When I got there, I was wearing a poor iteration of Tom Cruise in Top Gun. My friend introduced me to this girl, and we actually hit it off really well. She told me that my friend had told her a lot about me, and that they knew each other through their parents' work. We started talking about our interests, and were decently flirting with each other. Now I had gotten out of my first real relationship earlier that year, and I was not one to hop around from girl to girl, so being really flirty with someone on my first time meeting them was not something I was used to doing. At the end of the night, we were sitting in the ground floor of my friend's house, and we ended up kissing a little bit, which again was moving really fast for me. We started texting after that, but I kind of had a weird feeling about her and couldn't really see myself being in a relationship with her. But prior to realizing that, we had made plans for a date with my friend, who threw the party, and her boyfriend. When the day of the date came, I had come down with an 101.7 degree fever and felt very out of it. I called her to explain that I was sick and was extremely sorry, but I wouldn't be able to make the date. This was a solid 3 to 4 hours before we were supposed to meet, so I wasn't pulling out last minute. Her response kicked off most of the backward period of my high school life. She responded by saying, "Well, I wasn't going to tell you this earlier, but I have brain cancer, so I don't have much time to go on dates." The strangest part was she asked me not to tell anyone about it. She stated that this was because her father didn't want to use her cancer as a way to work people over to get stuff, which I found odd. Now, a little backstory. I had a football coach who had passed away from cancer, and my friend's mum, the friend who threw the party actually, also developed cancer around that time. So the topic of cancer was heavy on my heart, and I felt incredible guilt. And being the emotionally charged person I am, I decided to go on the date. During the date, she started saying that she really appreciated me coming and the way that I treated her. This made me feel better knowing that I was helping. At a point near the end of the date, we were walking towards my car when she again brought up that she appreciated the way I treat her. She followed it up by explaining that she wasn't used to guys treating her right because she was assaulted when she was younger and actually had to terminate a forced pregnancy at the hand of a male relative of hers. My heart broke for her as she sounded like she had endured a lot of hardship, on top of the fact that she was going to supposedly pass away next year. I was an emotional wreck following the date, because it was a lot for me to take in, but I knew that if all of a sudden I stopped talking to her, I would never forgive myself. At this point, I had a small sense of suspicion of things that she had told me, especially the part about not telling anyone under any circumstances. That coupled with a few other things she said to me on our date, regarding what she wanted to do with her future, saying things like, "I want to try out this hairstyle when I get older." After she said these things, she seemed to tense up a bit, but I chalked it up to her coming to terms with the fact that she'd never be able to do them. My suspicions grew and grew, and eventually I decided to do some investigating. Her father was a doctor at the place where I went for doctor things, and my personal doctor was a family friend of mine who knew her father well. I asked her if there was anything I could do to support or help her regarding her cancer. My doctor looked at me and said, "What cancer? She doesn't have cancer." I immediately became filled with anger and texted her telling her what I had learned. A day before, she had called me to let me know that her diagnosis was a mistake, but her tone was very melodramatic and not at all what I would expect as a response to finding out you didn't have a mortal disease. She tried to cover her tracks and was asking me why I would question her and saying, "I thought you cared about me." I was livid. I blocked her on everything and blocked her number. I also fall into a pretty deep depression for the next week or two because of how much I was yanked about by this girl, and this interaction led me to have major trust issues with women, which I have still not gotten over. A few weeks later, I get a Facebook Messenger request from a name I didn't recognize. It was her. She had made up a fake profile and was telling me I was being super immature and told me that she had some explaining to do. I, of course, didn't answer, and that was the last I heard of her, until a year and a half later. I had signed up for an ACT retake exam at my local university, and when I got there and sat down, I looked in front of me about 3 seats to the right, and she was there. We ended up talking and she apologized for everything she did in a relatively believable manner, and I forgave her. I never found out any of the other things she had told me about her home life if they were true or not, and I made sure to avoid her at all costs, which was a pain because she worked at a Cold Stone that was 2 minutes away from my house, and I had to go to the one downtown, which was annoying. I came across her real Facebook profile recently, as well as she seems to be doing well, which I'm glad to see. But as far as our interactions go, let's not meet again. When I was 15, a friend and I went for a lot of walks around town. Small town, around 5,000 to 6,000 people. We're going to this cyber cafe to meet a few friends, and we often took different streets to get places, just to keep it interesting. We were about to go to the main street off one of the side streets, and a man on a bicycle approached us. He got off his bike and asked a couple of questions. Something didn't seem right about him. He was mid-40s, and we both kept inching away, but didn't want to come off as rude. So we answered about the weather or traffic. Then he paused, and we said we had to go, and he said, "You look so young. I don't want you to get in trouble, but I need to touch someone. I just need to touch you. You should come with me." I just felt terror overtake me. I couldn't speak. I grabbed my friend's hand and turned. We sprinted the rest of the way to the cafe, and as soon as we were inside, we used the phone. I called my mum to pick us up while my friend told the co-worker what happened and what the guy looked like. A month later, I received my first cell phone. Me and my family live on a big farm out in the outskirts of a town. We often have friends come over and play games like Manhunt in the surrounding area. An important detail to note is that the farm is pretty much open. Anyone can waltz in, but most people don't, obviously, as it's private property. Well, one day we're playing Manhunt. It's about the middle of the day, and we're running around the place screaming. That's when we hear an unusual scream coming from the direction of the willow tree. We run over and get underneath its branches that actually hide someone from being seen. My cousin, who is about 16, is screaming. There's a man who is literally chasing her. We all look around, and we see him stalking the edge of one of the fields. We start freaking out. My cousin says that she was hiding behind another tree, and he came up from behind her, put both his hands on his shoulders and said, "This isn't gonna hurt." And she just kicked and ran, but the man was persistent. She had no idea what his intentions were, but she didn't want to find out. We got inside, called the police, and when they arrived, he was gone. From that day forward, we looked into getting some serious security. Gates, cameras, it just wasn't worth the risk anymore. My fiance and I are camping, as we've done many of times in a particular state park that we enjoy. Everything was normal. We made some dinner on the fire, stayed up a bit, and then let the fire die down and went to the tent to smoke. Despite listening to at least 100,000 of these Reddit stories, the woods never scared me. This night, though, was the night my brain decided that a reoccurring nightmare about someone walking around our tent would be a good idea. So, I'm going through these cycles of dreaming that I've woken up to footsteps around the tent, and try to wake up my fiancé. Fail, dream it again, and eventually wake up completely to realize there's nothing there. Right? 3 or 4 rounds into this mess, and I wake up to the footsteps again. This time I realize I'm not dreaming. There are definitely footsteps. Then I hear a deep, low, throaty growl, and I'm nearly petrified. I manage to reach over and wake my fiancé, whispering quietly, "There's something outside our tent." He wakes up, and we continue to hear something walking around the tent, growling and snarling. We're wetting ourselves. We can't decide if it's something big, because by the vocalizations it sounds it, but I'm hoping the footsteps are just amplified, as they generally are in the woods. And maybe this is just a really aggressive squirrel in a trench coat or something. We're trying to peek out but can't see anything. The noises move to the edge of the site, and there's a lot of snarling and animals screaming. Then silence. Then it's on the other side of the tent. It's making it really hard to decide what to do. We're both trying to be silent while gathering what little feeble weapons we have. Me and my pink canister of saber pepper gel, and him a few weapons that we brought to cut bits of rope and carry in case of emergencies. We don't even have the hatchet, because I let him pack while I was at work, which means we had about 85% of the important things we needed. I did this to myself. Clearly, we are doomed. There's some screaming going on along the edge of the site now. It sounds like every small animal in the northeastern United States is being skinned alive around our tent. I'm shaking like a leaf, no exaggeration, and I had to stand because the adrenaline pumping felt like I smoked a Bobby Brown's lifetime worth of crack. We still cannot pinpoint where this thing is, what it is, or catch any glimpses from our tent. We are definitely done for in the woods here. It's late in the season, and there's maybe one other occupied site, and we showed up too late to even check in. So no doubt, we're about to be a couple of unidentifiable mystery moles, and I'm losing my mind because I have a kid. Finally, it's been a few minutes since we heard any shrieks or growls. Last we heard, this thing sounded like it were a few sites away. And so we're gonna grab our wallets, leave the supplies, and get out of here and make a run for the car. We zoom the hell out of there. It's 2 a.m. and we get some Slim Gins at a convenience store. We go home for the night, gear up in the morning with some high-power CO2 weapons, hatchets, knife, you name it, and we go back. We didn't find anything. We made friends with a troop of tubby trash pandas for the rest of the trip, and kind of always wondered if, perhaps it was actually just our 3 raccoons in a trench coat terrorizing us that night. I'll never know, and it's better that way. I was in a mall in Indonesia, and 2 tourists seemed to be having problems communicating with the cashier at a bookstore, so I helped translate. They wanted to buy me drinks to thank me. I told them it wasn't necessary, as I had to go back to my mum soon. They told me to meet them for dinner, and I told them I have to have dinner at home. They told me to sneak out and meet them after dinner. At this point, a bookstore staff noticed something was wrong and went up to question them. My sister and I dashed off while we were distracted. We continued wandering around the mall and realized they were following us, and to see if we were just paranoid, we ducked into a lingerie store since we figured 2 men wouldn't usually need to go into one of these places, and they followed us in. We ran so quickly back to the jewelry store our mum was at. The store, thankfully, had intimidating security guards, and I guess that stopped these guys. For context, I was 11. and my sister was 10. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. Certainly a bunch of creepy experiences, to say the least. If something creepy has happened to you in your life and you'd like it narrated on the channel, feel free to submit it to my Reddit or send it to my email. Both are in the description. As always, a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons. You guys are amazing. If you'd like your name on screen, feel free to check out my Patreon. I'm also going to be launching very soon the join button. The join button on YouTube. Yes. It looks pretty interesting. It's basically a Patreon on YouTube already. And you get some perks for signing up. Me and my wife is creating the perks right now. And so when I'm ready and when I've done it all, I will launch it, but only then. I just want to make sure that if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to try and provide you with something else, that you actually get something for it. Alright then. Well, thanks guys, as always, for listening, and I hope you're all well. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.